It seemed like every time we turned on the news a few weeks ago, we heard the same word, Ebola. It made me so afraid of infection that I refused to leave the house unless I was carrying a bottle of bleach, a container of hand sanitizer, and wearing a surgical mask. Okay, I was not that obsessive. I was surprised, however, to discover that my obsession with killing germs may actually be creating a bigger problem, which is antimicrobial resistance. The Center for Disease Control explains that antimicrobial resistance is microbes changing in ways that reduce the effectiveness of drugs to cure or prevent infection. Microbes are the things like germs, viruses, bacteria that create the problems that we're trying to solve by using antibiotics. Here's a good example by Dr. Graham Beard. He has put two types of bacteria in petri dishes side by side. In the one on the left, we have sensitive bacteria. That is, they are still responsive to antibiotics. The one on the right contains bacteria that's developed a resistance to the antibiotics. The dots have been treated with antibiotics. You can see that the antibiotic-sensitive bacteria are repelled by the antibiotics on the dots, whereas the bacteria that have become resistant are willing to grow right past those antibiotic-treated dots. This is a problem that affects all of us. Today, we're going to discuss how the overuse of antibiotics threatens everyone, and then we're going to see some steps that each of us can take. I hope that we'll see that we are not helpless hosts to these growing, educated microbes, but rather there are steps that we can take. First, overuse of antibiotics threatens everyone. Alexander Fleming, the person who discovered penicillin and really helped to launch us forward into the world today where we have the use of antibiotics, said in his 1945 Nobel Prize speech that we are capable of educating microbes so that they resist penicillin. He said it is not difficult to make microbes resistant to penicillin in the laboratory by exposing them to concentrations not sufficient to kill them, and the same thing has occasionally happened in the body. What he's saying, he uses the analogy of educate. He says we can educate microbes if we use the antibiotic products too often, not killing them, but allowing them to evolve so that those products are not effective to kill them at a later time. A good example of that is MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. This form of staph infection has actually developed a resistance to the drug that is used to treat it most often. MRSA can be deadly. It is definitely painful as it causes significant tissue damage and it's prevalent. Caitlin Tahn, a student at Ohio University, along with her professor Timothy Ryan, studied 15 different dormitory restrooms at Ohio University. They swabbed the same 7 areas in those 15 restrooms, and they found MRSA prevalent in all 15 restrooms. And in 2 of the restrooms, they found MRSA on 34% of the surfaces swabbed. It's everywhere, and it can be an example of how we have created a germ that actually resists the strategies we once used to kill them. Dr. Keiji Fukada of the World Health Organization, he's the Assistant Director for General Health Security, said, "Without urgent, coordinated action by many stakeholders, the world is headed for a post-antibiotic era in which common infections and minor injuries, which have been treatable for decades, can once again kill." Now that we have seen the problem of overusing antibiotics, creating resistant bacteria and other microbes, let's see the steps that we can take. We can take steps to reduce this threat. I want to suggest 3 steps. First, I want to suggest the step of reduce, then the suggested step of adhere, and finally, the suggestion of vaccinate. The first thing we need to do is to reduce our use of antibacterial, antimicrobial products. Products such as these, soaps, cleaning solutions that are antibacterial, often claim that kill 99.9% of germs. It's often that 1%, however, that is the most dangerous, because those are the germs that have learned to circumvent those products. Daniela Genta of Alive magazine explains that the antibacterial products that kill the bad bacteria also kill good bacteria that live in our gut and work with our digestive system to help us digest food, and that create a bacterial balance of benign bacteria alongside the harmful bacteria. These are often killed in the process of cleaning through and using these antibiotic products. If we reduce our use of antibiotic products, then we can create a more homogeneous system, or a rather heterogeneous system that allows the bacteria to live in balance. The second thing, probably the most important thing we can do, is adhere. We can adhere to prescription instructions absolutely. A typical prescription bottle is going to contain certain pieces of information. It's going to contain the patient's name, it's going to contain the drug name, and it's going to contain instructions on how to take that drug. This particular prescription is for an infection, and it says that this patient is to take 1 tablet twice a day with food. That's at mealtime for 10 days. Now what may happen is that after about 5 days, Jane may start feeling a lot better, may actually feel like she's perfectly fine and stop taking the antibiotic. But what she does when she doesn't take the full round of antibiotics exactly as they are prescribed is she leaves a few bacteria lingering that have now been exposed to the drug that was used to kill them, but not at high enough concentration to do the job completely. Those have become the educated germs that we're trying to avoid. By adhering to prescription instructions, we avoid this mistake. But the final step that we can take is that we can vaccinate. Getting vaccinations on an annual basis, like the flu vaccine and other vaccinations that we need regularly, is still the #1 way to avoid getting sick. It is one of the ways that we take preventative steps rather than reactive steps like antibiotics. And this will keep us all healthier. So today I hope we have seen that there are 3 steps that we can take to avoid creating these antibacterial resistant microbes. We can reduce our use of antibacterial products, we can adhere to prescription instructions, and we can vaccinate and get the vaccinations we need. Even though we have this threat that all of us have created by overusing antibiotics, we can take steps to create healthier bodies and a healthier world.